Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling something pretty crucial for anyone on the path to becoming an LAPD detective.
Oh yeah, the detective exam.
The exam itself is tough enough, but one of the biggest things you need to know is MOU 24.
Inside and out.
Inside and out.
Yeah.
It's the Memorandum of Understanding that governs pretty much every part of your work life as a detective.
It's like your rule book. I mean, it's more than just rules. Your rights, your benefits, how things work within the LAPD, it's all right there.
It's critical to understand MOU 24, and not just for the exam either, for your entire career. So we're going to go through some of the most important parts of it today.
Absolutely.
But, there's always a but, this deep dive is based on the agreement from August 14th, 2019. It covers August 1st, 2019 through June 30, 2022.
Things change. Policies get updated. Always check for the latest version of MOU 24.
Always. Think of this as your roadmap, but you got to make sure you have the most up-to-date map before you head out, right?
That's a great analogy. Speaking of roadmaps, let's start with what MOU 24 actually is. It's the agreement between the City of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles Police Protective League.
The LAPPL.
Exactly. That's the union that represents all LAPD officers below the rank of lieutenant.
So it's not just a document from the LAPD, it's a negotiated agreement.
Right.
Both sides had a say.
Exactly. And that's important to remember because it means there's a balance of power involved. Now, one of the first things that jumps out at you in MOU 24 is Article 1.8c. No strikes, no lockouts.
Oh, that sounds serious.
It is.
No strikes.
It means that both the city and the league are committed to continuous police operations.
Okay.
The city can't lock officers out and officers can't strike. And why is that? Because public safety comes first. You, as a detective, are considered essential to keeping the city safe. 24/7. It's a big responsibility.
Definitely. Okay, so let's say you were thinking about getting more involved with the Police Protective League, maybe even becoming a league director. Article 2.6 talks about that role.
Yeah, and there are some interesting details in there. Well, for example, as a league director, you get release time to represent the union. And that time doesn't count against your city service time for things like the Fair Labor Standards Act.
FLSA.
FLSA.
Exactly.
So it's like hitting the pause button on some parts of your career while you serve the league.
Exactly. But there are some trade-offs. You won't get city overtime or holiday pay while you're doing league business,
Okay.
but you do get city benefits for police activities.
Interesting. What about performance evaluations? If you're on release time, do you just skip those?
You get what's called a standard-based assessment, an SBA, but it just indicates that you weren't rated during that period because you were on release time. Important to understand these nuances if you're thinking about taking on a leadership role within the league.
So it's like a different path within the LAPD. Now let's talk about something crucial for every officer. Your personnel file.
Article 3.1, transparency. You have the right to review your entire file, including all electronic records.
Okay.
And here's a pro tip. Get copies of everything before it even gets added to your file. Why is that so important?
It allows you to make sure everything is accurate. If something's wrong, you can address it early on. Much harder to fix things after they've been sitting in your file for years.
So being proactive about your own career.
Exactly. And speaking of being proactive, MOU 24 talks about maintaining a drug-free workplace.
Article 3.4. This is about upholding the public's trust, right?
Absolutely. LAPD officers are held to a higher standard, so random drug testing is part of the job. But it's not just about enforcement. The LAPD encourages officers to seek help if they need it.
Okay.
There are resources available for rehab, and the MOU makes it clear that the department wants to support officers who are struggling with addiction.
So it's a balance, accountability and support. Now let's get into how random drug testing actually works. Article 3.5D lays it all out.
It's pretty interesting. The medical liaison section handles the testing, and they often just show up at roll call unannounced.
No warning.
Nope. Random. And they test both probationary and tenured officers, so no one is exempt. The MOU goes into a lot of detail about the whole process, from sample collection to the chain of custody. Shows how seriously they take maintaining a fair and accurate process.
No messing around.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to something that's probably on everyone's mind. Schedules.
Articles 4.1 and 4.2. Working hours.
So they can adjust that standard schedule based on workload or crime trends, but generally it stays within a certain range.
Right.
But the good news is you can adjust your schedule for court appearances that fall outside of your regular shift, so you don't have to rack up all that overtime.
That's right, but you need approval from your watch commander for that.
So some flexibility, but you have to go through the proper channels.
Right. And documentation is key in the LAPD. Everything needs to be in writing.
Now, what about holidays? Do detectives even get holidays? I mean, crime doesn't just stop because it's Christmas.
Yeah. Exactly. Minimal coverage is expected on major holidays like New Year's Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. But here's the good news. You get premium pay for working those holidays. Article 4.2F.
A little incentive to work those less than desirable shifts.
Exactly. And speaking of incentives, there's a detail in Article 4.4 that might be helpful to you as you're studying for the exam.
Oh, tell me more.
So if you have a city-given oral promotional exam during work hours, you get paid time off for it.
Nice.
And that includes travel time.
So you're not losing out on pay just because you're taking steps to advance your career.
Right. But keep in mind, no overtime pay for exams that fall outside your regular schedule. You got to be strategic about managing your time.
Now, let's talk about something everyone loves. Incentives and bonuses.
Yes.
Articles 5.4, 5.5, 5.7 through 5.9 get into all the specifics.
There's a uniform field officer incentive for eligible patrol and specialized unit officers, a detective incentive, a geographic patrol and crime suppression incentive, even a marksmanship bonus. If you reach the expert level in marksmanship, you get an extra $32 biweekly.
That's pretty cool.
Right.
So there are financial rewards for going above and beyond.
Definitely. The LAPD recognizes and rewards officers who demonstrate excellence in different areas.
And speaking of financial matters, let's talk overtime, a big part of many officers' lives, and Article 6.1D gets into how it's handled.
Overtime, everyone's favorite topic.
What are some key things to know?
Well, for example, starting July 1, 2020, your current overtime balance resets. And you have a choice. You can either get paid out for that overtime or take it as time off.
But you have some control over how that overtime is managed.
Exactly. But there's a catch. You have to have less than 150 hours of overtime accrued to be eligible for that choice. Once you hit 150 hours, you're automatically paid out.
It's all about work-life balance, right? Sometimes you need the cash, sometimes you need the time off. Now, court time pay, Article 6.3. Very detailed.
Very detailed. This is important because court appearances can be a big part of a detective's job. The MOU makes it clear how you're compensated for those appearances, whether it's an on-call subpoena or a be-there subpoena.
So even if you're on call and don't actually have to appear in court, you still get paid.
You do. You get 2.5 hours of overtime regardless of how long you're on call. And if you do have to appear, the MOU outlines all those different scenarios and how they're compensated.
So it's all about knowing your rights and making sure you're properly compensated for your time.
Exactly. Now, we've talked a lot about the demands of the job, but it's important to remember that the LAPD also recognizes that you have a life outside of work.
You're not just a badge number.
Articles 7.7, 7.8, and 7.9 family and medical leave, family illness leave, and bereavement leave.
So if you have a family emergency or a medical issue, you're covered.
Exactly. Family illness leave, for example, gives you up to 96 hours off with pay per year to care for an immediate family member who is sick. It's a recognition that life happens, and sometimes you need to prioritize your family.
It's about having that support system in place when you need it most.
Right. And of course, health and dental benefits are a huge part of that support system.
Let's dive into those. Articles 7.1 and 7.11, health and dental.
Yes. And the city provides a monthly subsidy towards both health and dental plans. Specific amounts are outlined for each year of the MOU. So, for example, as of August 1st, 2019, the health subsidy was capped at $4,460 per month.
That's a significant chunk of change. Helps to offset those rising healthcare costs.
Absolutely. And there are built-in increases that are tied to the percentage change in the Police Blue Cross Prudent Buyer PPO family plan rate.
So you're not completely at the mercy of those yearly premium hikes. That's good to know.
Right. And one of the things that I find particularly noteworthy is that the health subsidy continues for the family of an officer who is killed in the line of duty. It's a powerful statement about the LAPD's commitment to supporting families, even in the face of tragedy.
It's about knowing that your family will be taken care of if the unthinkable happens.
Absolutely. And lastly, let's talk about what happens if you ever need to address a concern or challenge a decision. No workplace is perfect, right? Sometimes issues arise.
So what are your options if that happens?
Well, Articles 8 and 9 of MOU 24 outline the grievance procedure and the administrative appeal process. These are formal channels for addressing concerns and making sure everyone is treated fairly.
So it's not just about complaining to your buddies. There are actual procedures in place.
Exactly. For example, if you're a tenured officer and you receive a suspension of 1 to 22 days, you have the right to appeal that suspension through this process.
So it's about having a voice, being able to advocate for yourself if you feel you've been treated unfairly.
Right. It's about due process.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
A lot. And believe it or not, we've only scratched the surface of MOU 24. It's a dense document packed with information that's crucial for your career as an LAPD detective.
We've hit some of the highlights, but remember, this deep dive was just a starting point. Read the full MOU 24 document yourself and stay updated. Policies change, new agreements are negotiated. Your knowledge needs to be as current as MOU 24 itself.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve into even more essential details from MOU 24.
Okay, we're back. Part 2 of our deep dive into MOU 24.
The document that's basically your Bible as an LAPD detective. It really touches on just about every single aspect of your working life, and we're here to help you understand not just what it says, but what it means for you on the street and in the station.
Exactly. And in part 1, we talked about some big stuff.
Yeah.
No strikes, the role of league directors, those random drug tests. Now let's get into something that could be a bit tricky to navigate. Grievances.
Ugh, grievances. It's important to know your rights, but also to understand that not everything is grievable. Article 8.2 of MOU 24, it lays out the things that you can't file a grievance about.
Okay, so before you even start the process, you need to make sure you have a legitimate grievance.
Exactly. And one of the big ones is probationary terminations. That decision rests solely with the department. Think about it. Probation, that's the time when they're really evaluating your suitability for the job, and they need to have the flexibility to make those tough calls.
So if you're still on probation, your options are more limited.
Right. What else falls into this non-grievable category? Well, performance evaluations, for one. They're based on the department's standards. You can't really argue with their assessment of your performance.
But what if you think an evaluation is unfair? Like maybe your supervisor just has it out for you.
That's where it gets a little nuanced. You can't grieve the evaluation itself, but you can file a grievance if you think the evaluation was used improperly. Like if it was used to deny you a promotion when you clearly deserved it.
Yeah. So it's more about how the evaluation is used, not the evaluation itself.
It has to have some kind of tangible impact on your career. Now, what about transfers? A lot of officers have questions about whether transfers are grievable.
Yeah, like if you get transferred to a less desirable assignment, can you file a grievance about that?
It depends. Routine transfers, the kind that happen just to meet operational needs, those generally are not grievable.
The department needs to be able to move people around.
Right.
But there must be some exceptions.
Of course, if you believe a transfer was done for discriminatory reasons or as retaliation, like maybe you spoke out against something and all of a sudden you're getting transferred to the graveyard shift, then that's a different story.
You got to be able to prove something fishy is going on, not just that you don't like the new assignment.
Exactly. It needs to be more than just a personal preference. Now, let's say you do have a legitimate grievance. What happens then? Article 8.4 outlines the entire grievance procedure, step by step. And it all starts with you.
You have to take the initiative.
You do. You have to put your grievance in writing and submit it to your commanding officer. And then they have 10 calendar days to meet with you and try to resolve the issue informally.
So they really want to encourage that open communication. Try to resolve things at the lowest level possible.
That's right. Often it's easier and quicker to just work things out directly with your supervisor.
What if you can't reach a resolution that way? What's the next step?
Then things start to move up the chain of command, the Police Protective League gets involved, and they submit your grievance to the Employee Relations Administrator. That person represents the Chief of Police.
Okay.
They meet, they discuss the issue, and hopefully they can come to a resolution.
So it gets a bit more formal at that stage.
It does. And remember all those time limits we talked about earlier?
Mm-hmm.
They apply here too.
So no dragging things out.
Everyone's got to stick to the schedule. But if you're still not satisfied, even after going through all of that, then your grievance can go to arbitration.
Arbitration. That sounds serious.
It is. Arbitration means bringing in a neutral third party to make a decision, and that decision is final and binding on both sides, like the final word.
Who chooses the arbitrator?
It's a joint decision between the city and the Police Protective League, and they both split the cost of the whole arbitration process.
So even though it's dealing with a dispute, it's still a collaborative effort.
Exactly.
Now, what about appeals?
Mm.
Are those different from grievances?
Yeah, that's something I've always wondered about. What is the distinction?
Administrative appeals. They're outlined in Article 9. It's a separate process.
Yeah.
And they cover specific matters, like, for example, challenging a suspension.
Okay.
And here's a key difference. In a grievance, the arbitrator's decision is final. But in an appeal, the hearing officer makes a recommendation, but it's not binding on the chief of police.
So the chief still has the final say in an appeal. Exactly. The chief reviews the hearing officer's findings, but ultimately, it's the chief who makes the decision. And just like with grievances, there are strict timelines and procedures that everybody has to follow when it comes to appeals. It's all about ensuring fairness and transparency throughout the entire process.
It's good to know these systems are in place, even if you hopefully never have to use them.
Agreed. But knowledge is power, right?
Mhm.
And understanding how these processes work can give you a real sense of confidence and control if you ever find yourself in a challenging situation.
Let's switch gears. Let's talk about something a little more enjoyable. Benefits.
Ah, yes, the perks of the job.
MOU 24 gets into a lot of detail about vacation time, holidays, sick leave, all the good stuff.
All the good stuff.
So let's break it down, starting with vacation. How much do you get, and how does it all work?
Article 7.1 covers all things vacation. And the good news is it's pretty generous. You start with 120 hours of vacation time annually.
That's 2 weeks. Not bad.
Not bad at all. And it gets even better. After 2 years of service, it bumps up to 128 hours. After 10 years, it jumps to 192 hours. And after 30 years, you're looking at a whopping 200 hours of vacation time.
Wow. That's almost 5 weeks. It definitely pays to stick around. Now, how does vacation selection work? Is it first come, first served, or is there some kind of system?
There is a system. It's outlined in Article 7.1.1, and it's based on seniority. Makes sense, right? Got to make sure there's enough coverage at all times.
So the more senior officers get first dibs on the best vacation time.
Yeah. Basically, you submit your requests in writing by September 30th each year for the following calendar year. And seniority is determined by your time as a sworn employee of the unit. If multiple people have the same hire date, they use serial numbers to break the tie.
So the lower your serial number, the more seniority you have.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's like a little badge of honor within the department. What happens if you get transferred to a different unit? Does that mess up your vacation plans?
Good question. The MOU actually addresses that. Commanding officers are supposed to make a good faith effort to honor your originally scheduled vacation time, even if you've transferred.
Oh, that's good.
Of course, there are always exceptions. If your vacation would seriously impact the operation of the new unit, they might have to ask you to change it up.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Duty calls.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to holidays. Does MOU 24 get into the specifics of holidays?
It does. Article 7.3 spells it all out. You get paid time off for 11 holidays each year.
Okay. But we talked earlier about how detectives are often expected to work on major holidays. How does that factor in?
Right. That's where things get a little more complex. So for those who work a flexible watch schedule, instead of getting specific days off, they get an allotment of holiday hours.
Okay.
And the number of holiday hours you get can vary slightly from year to year, depending on how those shift rotations fall.
So it might not be perfectly consistent, but it all balances out in the end.
Exactly. And the MOU even acknowledges those variations and clarifies that they're not intentional. Now, let's talk about sick leave. Nobody wants to get sick, but it happens.
It happens.
Article 7.4 covers all the details.
Okay. What are the key things to know about sick leave?
Well, you accrue 96 hours of sick leave annually. You can use it for illness, injury, pregnancy. And the MOU also covers things like, family illness leave, which we discussed earlier. Just nice to know that you've got options if you need them.
Peace of mind.
Peace of mind, knowing that you're covered if life throws you a curveball.
Now, what about other types of leave, like bereavement leave?
Article 7.9 covers that. You get 3 days of paid leave if an immediate family member passes away. And the MOU defines immediate family pretty broadly. It includes parents, siblings, spouses, children, grandparents, even household members.
That's good to know. You never know when you might need that kind of support.
Absolutely. And the MOU also covers family and medical leave in Article 7.7, which is, of course, a federally mandated program.
Okay. I think we've covered the main types of leave there. But this is all getting pretty dense.
It is. But it's important information. These benefits are a significant part of your overall compensation package, and knowing the rules can really help you make informed decisions, both about your career and about your life.
All right, ready to tackle the next section. Okay, we are back for the final part of our deep dive into MOU 24. It's been quite a journey.
It has a lot of information to unpack, but it's all crucial stuff for anyone getting ready for the detective exam and for, your career in general with the LAPD.
Exactly. We've covered your rights as an officer, how to navigate those tricky grievance and appeal processes. We even talked about how vacation time and sick leave work.
Right, all the essentials.
Now let's zero in on something that's really essential for your well-being, both on and off the job. Healthcare.
Yeah, healthcare is a big deal. Thankfully, MOU 24 doesn't skimp on the details.
Nope.
Article 7.70, it lays out how the city helps you manage those healthcare costs.
Because let's be real, healthcare can be expensive.
Oh,
So what kind of support does the MOU offer?
the city provides a monthly subsidy toward your health insurance. As of August 1st, 2019, that subsidy was capped at $4,460 a month.
That's a significant amount. It can make a big difference in your budget.
It really can.
But we all know healthcare costs are always on the rise. Does MOU 24 take that into account?
It does. That subsidy, it's not a fixed amount.
Okay,
It's designed to increase over time.
good.
It keeps pace with the percentage change in what's called the Police Blue Cross Prudent Buyer PPO family plan rate.
So you're not stuck with the same amount year after year while your premiums keep going up.
Exactly.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Now, what about choices? When it comes to health plans, do you get any options or are you locked into a specific provider?
You have options. You're not locked into one provider. You have a whole range of plans to choose from. Police Blue Cross Prudent Buyer, Police Kaiser, Police Blue Cross California Care. You can even choose LA city-sponsored plans. And if the league negotiates a new plan that they think is really good and the city approves it, you can enroll in that as well.
So there's a good mix of options.
Yeah.
What if, let's say, your spouse has really good insurance through their work? Do you have to enroll in a city plan?
You don't necessarily have to.
Okay.
The MOU recognizes that not everybody needs to use the city's coverage. If you can show that you've got adequate coverage through your spouse or through a domestic partner, you can opt out of the city's plan.
And is there any incentive to opt out? Or do you just kind of, you're on your own?
They give you a little something. The MOU provides a $100 a month incentive if you choose to opt out and utilize your spouse's or domestic partner's insurance.
It's not a ton of money, but it's something. Nice little perk.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about health insurance. What about dental? Is it a separate thing?
Dental coverage is covered under Article 7.11, and it's structured in a pretty similar way to the health benefit.
Okay.
The city offers a monthly subsidy toward your dental plan. And as of August 1st, 2019, that subsidy was $84 a month.
Okay, so same concept as the healthcare subsidy, but obviously a smaller dollar amount.
Right, but just like with healthcare, that dental subsidy increases over time. So it goes up to $86 in July 2020, and then $88 in July 2021.
Helps to offset those rising dental costs.
Hmm.
Okay, let's talk about something that nobody really wants to think about, but it's important to address. What happens if an officer is killed in the line of duty?
Summer topic, but it's important.
Yeah.
And thankfully, MOU 24 addresses it directly.
Right.
Article 7.15 outlines what's called the death benefit.
So there is some financial support for the families of fallen officers.
Absolutely. The city provides up to $30,000 for funeral expenses to the heirs of any officer killed in the line of duty. Just a way to ease that financial burden during such a difficult time.
And we also talked earlier about how that health subsidy continues for the family.
It does.
So they don't have to worry about losing their health care coverage on top of everything else.
Right.
It's good to know that that's there. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit, talk about a different kind of challenge, something that hopefully you will never face. But if a dispute arises, if you feel you've been treated unfairly or a decision needs to be challenged, how does MOU 24 handle those situations?
That's a good question. The MOU is very clear about this, lays out very specific procedures for addressing concerns and seeking resolutions. And it all starts with the idea of resolving things at the lowest level possible.
So before you go filing a formal grievance, You should try to work things out with your commanding officer directly.
Exactly. That's the first step. It's outlined in Article 8.4. Put your grievance in writing, submit it to your commanding officer, and they have 10 days to meet with you and try to find a solution.
So you've got that built-in timeline to prevent things from dragging on forever.
Right. And the MOU, it emphasizes that the commanding officer should make a good faith effort to resolve that issue. It's about open communication and trying to find some common ground.
But what if you just can't reach an agreement with your supervisor? What happens then?
Then the process moves up the chain of command. The Police Protective League gets involved, and they take your grievance to what we call the Employee Relations Administrator, who represents the Chief of Police.
Okay.
They meet, they discuss the issue, and hopefully they can reach a solution that works for everybody.
So you've got that support from the league throughout that whole process.
You do.
But even after all that, if you're still not satisfied, what then?
The MOU provides a final step: arbitration.
Arbitration. That's where things get real.
It is. It means bringing in a neutral third party, an arbitrator, to make a decision that's binding on everybody involved. It's like the ultimate tiebreaker.
So who decides who this arbitrator is?
It's a joint decision between the city and the Police Protective League, and they also share the cost of that arbitration process.
But even though you're dealing with a dispute, it's still a pretty collaborative effort. We touched on appeals earlier.
Yeah.
But what's the difference between a grievance and an appeal?
An appeal, it's outlined in Article 9. It's a separate process. And in an appeal, you get a hearing before a hearing officer who then makes a recommendation. But here's the key difference. That recommendation, it's not binding on the Chief of Police.
So the chief has the final say.
Exactly. The chief reviews the hearing officer's findings, but ultimately the chief decides whether to uphold or modify or overturn that original decision.
Wow, MOU 24. A lot to unpack.
It is comprehensive, no doubt about it, but it's also incredibly important for you to understand as you move forward with the LAPD.
It's your roadmap, your rule book, your guide to all things LAPD. And we hope this deep dive has given you a good understanding of all that MOU 24 covers.
It's a great starting point.
A great starting point.
But the best advice I can give is to read the full MOU 24 document yourself.
Yes.
And stay updated. Policies change. New agreements are negotiated all the time. Your knowledge needs to be as current as MOU 24 itself.
Excellent advice. We hope this deep dive has given you the confidence and the tools you need to succeed. Best of luck on the exam, future detective.
We'll see you back here on the deep dive for your next knowledge adventure.